Good morning, everyone. Leslie Jones, Michelle Silverman Bedell. We're here to talk about inspections. We're in that spring season, and we thought that it would be appropriate to discuss inspections and how it's integrated into the contract as well.
It's and specifically with respect to environmental issues. I think today people are very concerned about the environment within the house, not just the environment outside, and how it's impacted by various things. And I think that there are several main components of an inspection that have to do with the environment. And one big one is obviously radon. And radon is a gas that comes from the earth and from rock, and it's associated with lung cancer. And people are very concerned about it, but it's a very easy way to remediate for radon. They test for it by putting canisters in the house. They leave it for a couple of days, and then they get a report. And if there is a high level of radon, you can either retest or you can remediate by putting in a system that eliminates the radon from the house. That should be tested it's constantly being monitored. But if you're concerned about radon, you could always retest it every 2 years, they suggest, as well as if you do a renovation. And remember never to dig or drill anything into the ground, because radon can, such as a safe, because radon can come up from the ground as well.
That is true. And the way, because radon takes several days to come back,
right.
One of the things that we usually do is put a contingency in the contract that relates to radon, because everyone's sort of in a rush during, especially the spring market.
Right.
So we put like 5 to 7 days in the contracts for the radon test to come back. And if it comes back higher than it's this standard level, then what will happen is we will have a provision that says it has to be remediated, or various different ways of handling that. But that's just because of the timeline with that, and everything's kind of very fast moving. That's the way we handle it.
Right, and usually the seller we'll ask the seller to remediate for that environmental concern and that issue. Typically the cost is depending on the house size and how accessible the canister can be or the mechanism can be installed. It's typically about $2,000 to $2,500. And I think that varies on the size of the house. I think another big environmental issue would be asbestos. And asbestos you could find it in tile, 9-inch tile, old 9-inch tile that they used years ago in the basements. You could find it behind insulation. You could find it in the attic. You could find it on piping.
It's a big problem. Usually that's where we see it.
Right, and you really, a lot of people will say, well, we'll encapsulate it, but I'm finding today most people want it removed from the house, and that could be quite a costly endeavor, and because they have to remove it and they have to prepare the house for it so it doesn't spread all over the house. And obviously you don't want to do it when somebody's living there, right?
Right.
So it's and then they would have to do a retest afterwards. It could amount to thousands of dollars depending on the amount of radon and I think if it's beyond a certain level in terms of square feet, then the state has to get involved.
And you also want to make sure all of these people are licensed to do the work.
Right.
You can't just hire anyone or a handyman to clean up the situation,
no.
Which I do see. We've had that on occasion where people think that you can do that,
no.
But you definitely need always certified licensed people for whatever remediation items you're handling.
Right, and I think the next issue, there are several, the other issue is mold. That's really a big issue today, especially as we approach the spring and as the snow is melting, and you really have to look for any kind of water penetration that would cause the mold or invasion into the house, as well as any leaks or humidity that can create a mold situation. And you would want to really take care of that immediately so it doesn't really spread to other parts of the house.
Absolutely. And that it's highly recommended to do all this before. Certain states allow for inspection provisions post contract signing.
Like
New York does not. So you want to get everything you can handled as quickly as you can before you enter into a contract. That way the attorney knows what has to be included into the contract.
And I think with mold, they can easily test by swabbing an area, taking samples, as well as they have a moisture meter that can see the levels of mold or any kind of humidity in the house. I think the other issue, another big issue, is lead. I have to say that, and to your point that you can test, right, I think 10 days after the contract is signed, the buyer can test for lead. Most people will not test for it. They'll test for it in the water, but I don't see too many people swabbing the surface of the walls to test for lead. I could think of maybe 10 cases in maybe 30 years of doing this where I've seen it.
Well, it's mostly for any properties that really haven't been touched.
Right, or really old.
Right, really old, where there's been, possibility of use of lead paint. But in most cases, most of these homes have been updated at this point, and they haven't, because
Right.
lead really, they stopped using lead prior in
1978. Yeah.
So we don't see that much of that.
No, but people have asked me about it just recently, and I explained to them that unless somebody's prepared to take down all the walls, usually it's been painted, as Leslie said, and it's less of a concern. So in terms of, I think the other big issue today, especially dealing with older homes, would be underground storage tanks, and that's an environmental issue because it can involve contamination of the soil.
Right. And the ways to, usually if there's any reason to believe that there is something underground, you hire someone to scan the property to at least
Right.
get a sense of whether there's anything more to that, because sometimes there's piping that leads one to believe there is something.
Right.
And the way to look for that is scanning, which isn't foolproof, but
No,
it
but at least-
definitely helps.
Yeah, unless one thinks it's under a terrace or under the house, because there was an addition done, and then it becomes a little tricky to get an accurate assessment of if there is an underground storage tank. But I think that it's something that really should be explored and really checked when you're buying a property. Even, and usually with these older homes, people remove them and never thought about getting a permit for it. You really need to get a permit. Certain communities, such as New Rochelle, they file everything with the fire department, and they keep really meticulous records. Other communities, the building department takes care of it, but you really should explore and just really do your due diligence when buying, particularly an old property where there could have been an underground oil tank. Sometimes there are 2 underground tanks, so you really have to explore that.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think in terms of environmental issues, that takes care of most of them. And now you were mentioning, Leslie, that you're seeing a lot of water testing, right?
Yes. Lately I've been seeing people who want to test the water, and specifically more so up in northern Westchester. I see more
Right.
of that because the wells are used, and so you definitely are always doing doing a test, which is required in Westchester.
Right.
However, even down county, I'm seeing people concerned because if pipes are older,
Right,
there's
lead.
a possibility of lead. So
Right.
it's something that's done, and sometimes we put it as a contingency as well because it takes a little more time.
Right.
Usually the seller will cure those problems.
Right. So I think that takes care of most of the big environmental issues that people are concerned about when buying a home. And the seller also a homeowner may also want to do like a pre-sale kind of review of what's going on in their house, just to anticipate any future problems. So
That's always a good idea. Just a quick, sort of overview with an inspector before
Right.
you even put it on the market.
Right. So I think that's really a good point and a good way to approach the sale of your home. So on that note, we wish everybody a nice weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Be well. Bye-bye.